The great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. The more, therefore, you relinquish power and trust others, the more powerful you become. But in such a way that instead of having to lie awake at night controlling everything, you do it beautifully by trusting the job to everyone else, and they carry it on for you. So you can go to sleep at night and trust your nervous system to wake you up in the morning. You can even tell it, I want to wake up at 6, and it'll wake you up, just like an alarm clock. This seems a sort of paradox to say this, but the principle of unity, of coming to a sense of oneness with the whole rest of the universe, is not to try to obtain power over the rest of the universe. That will only disturb it, antagonize it, and make it seem less one with you than ever. The way to become one with the universe is to trust it and others as you would trust another, and say, let's see what you're going to do. But in doing that, you see, in saying that to everything else that you've been taught to think is not you, you are also saying it to yourself. Because finally, as I've pointed out, you do not know where your decisions come from. They pop up like hiccups. And when you make a decision, people have a great deal of anxiety about making decisions. There's this guy, a farmer, who hired a farmhand to help, and he found he was an extraordinarily efficient worker. Because on the first day, he put him on sawing logs, and he sawed more logs than anyone had ever sawn. It was fantastic. But it was all done in one day. So the next day, he put him onto mending fences. And there were all kinds of broken fences around the farm. And in one day, he had the whole thing done. So he thought, what am I going to do with this guy? So he took him down into the basement and said, look, here are all the potatoes that have come in from the harvest, and I want you to sort them into 3 groups. Those that we sell, those that we use for seeding, and those that we throw away. So he left him to it. But by the end of the day, the worker came back and said, that's it, I'm done, I quit. The farmer said, what, you can't quit? I've never had anyone work so well. I'll raise your pay. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you. But the man said, no, it's fine. Mending fences and chopping wood is one thing, but sorting these potatoes is just one decision after another. Non-stop decisions. That's the real exhausting part. And that's the problem when we make choices. We always second-guess ourselves. Did I think long enough? Did I gather all the right information? But if you dig deeper, you see, you never have all the information. In fact, the amount of data you'd need to consider for even a small decision is practically infinite. So what we really do is go through the motions. We pretend we're thinking it all through, but when the moment to act arrives, we make a quick call. Now, I'm exaggerating a bit for effect, because, sure, now and then, we do see the shape of things clearly enough to make a sound decision based on reason. But what's fascinating is how often it all turns out fine, despite all the unknowns we forgot or never saw. You see, warriors are the ones always thinking about every single variable they can't control, imagining what could go wrong. But when you do make a choice and it turns out well, chances are very little of that outcome had to do with your conscious effort or analysis. Oddly enough, things tend to flow more smoothly when you let go of control and trust others. That's why great entrepreneurs and leaders are the ones who can delegate, who empower others to handle the work, because they build their ventures on the same foundation as any living system. shared responsibility and distributed power. It nurtures and supports everything without dominating anything. And what's truly happening is this: the more you let go, as if what you're trusting is something entirely outside yourself, the more you begin to see that you and the other were never separate to begin with. But if you try to find that unity by forcing the other to submit to the self, it won't work. If instead you hand over control to what seems other and act with trust, yes, you may stumble, you may get it wrong, but you're aligning yourself with the principle that's deeply embedded in how life itself evolves. That's the secret behind nature's intelligence. It thrives on shared power. That's also why democracy, even if messy and imperfect, surpasses monarchy. Wasn't it de Tocqueville who said, "Democracy is always right, but for the wrong reasons, because in a democracy there's a hidden intelligence at work, a collective wisdom that emerges not from command, but from trust." This is the principle Buckminster Fuller referred to as synergy, the intelligence that arises from a complex system, one so intricate that none of its individual parts can ever fully comprehend the whole. And that ties back, once again, to the idea that we are always stepping into new environments. Not environments we understand, but ones we haven't encountered before. We only ever really understand past environments, the ones we've already lived through. And yet, at every level of evolution, from cells to civilizations, something novel is always emerging, a form of organization that surpasses anything known before, but we don't recognize it until it's already happened. Take, for instance, the Kon-Tiki expedition. This man figured out just enough to build a balsa wood raft and sail it from South America to the Pacific Islands. He worked with the little he knew, but once the journey began, he discovered that all kinds of unexpected natural elements cooperated with him. The wood, when soaked, would expand just right, tightening the lashings and holding the raft secure. Flying fish would land on deck each morning. Breakfast delivered by nature itself. It was as if he had hit a harmonic note in the universe. He wasn't forcing things. He was in tune with something ancient and wise, a tradition perhaps followed centuries ago by those deeply attuned to ecological rhythms. And what arises from this way of seeing, from this letting go, isn't some sentimental idea of virtue or sacrifice. It leads to something far more grounded, a political reality that is radically practical. To release control, to stop dominating every moment, has become not just a spiritual idea, but a matter of strategic survival. And equally, in a parallel sense, it is now practical politics to learn how to enjoy your life. You could go to the most hardened moralists, those with their Protestant ethic, who have long rejected pleasure as a serious pursuit, and say to them, with all sincerity, it is now your duty to enjoy yourself. Why? Because in an age of abundant leisure, people must learn how to enjoy life, or they will destroy everything in their boredom and confusion. So you see, utopia is no longer a fantasy. It's not an idealistic dream. It's a practical necessity. Without it, humanity spirals into self-destruction, a collapse fueled by paranoia, by the endless search for someone else to blame, by the delusion that we can fix our pain by eliminating scapegoats. That's the madness you see playing out now. Left, right, conspiracies, purges, constant outrage. It's all irrelevant, because we've reached a point where we must now trust something deeper. Our intelligence, our technology, and our capacity to risk doing what we truly desire. And it will work to the degree we realize this. What I really want is deeply tied to what you want. And what you want? I don't know. Surprise me? That's the bridge, the kinship between I and thou. And so when we return to the root question, what do I really want? The honest answer is, I don't know. When Bodhidharma was asked, who are you? He replied, I don't know, planting flowers, to which the butterflies come. He says, I know not. And that right there is the beauty of not knowing, the beginning of desirelessness. When you truly don't know, something interesting happens. There's an early stage of not knowing, and then there's a deeper, more profound kind of not knowing. In the beginning, you don't know what you want, simply because you haven't thought much about it. Or perhaps you've only skimmed the surface. Then someone challenges you to really think it through. So you start listing things. I'd like this, maybe that, perhaps the other. That's the middle phase. But if you keep going, you start to question, is that really what I want? Eventually, you reach a point where you say, no, I don't think that's it. It might satisfy you for a time. You wouldn't push it away, but it's not it. So why don't we really know what we want? There are two main reasons. First, you already have it. And second, you don't know yourself. You can't know yourself. The divine, what some might call the Godhead, is never an object of its own awareness. Just as a blade can't cut itself, fire doesn't burn itself, and light can't shine on itself. There's always a mystery at the heart of it all, a mystery that cannot be solved, only lived. So this I don't know, spoken from the depths of being, is the same as saying, I surrender, I trust, I release. It is humility, it is love, it is the willingness to stop grasping. As the Upanishads put it, if you think you understand Brahman, then you do not understand. But if you know that you do not understand, then you are beginning to truly understand. For Brahman is unknown to those who claim to know it, and known to those who admit they don't. And here's the principle. Whenever you consciously relinquish control, whenever you loosen your grip on yourself, something shifts. You experience a surge of power, because all that energy you were spending on managing, defending, clinging, becomes available. And in that moment, you align with the current of the Tao, the divine energy, the natural flow of life. But when you try to act like a god, by controlling everything, by refusing to trust, by needing to command and dominate, you lose that power, because now you're just surviving, burning through your energy in a state of constant self-protection. So the paradox is this: the more you let go, the more comes back to you. Now you might say, I'm scared, I don't have the courage to let go. But eventually you realize you have to let go, because there's nothing to hold on to. Everything is dissolving anyway. Everything is falling apart. We are all, in a sense, dying every moment. All that we cling to, our hopes, our plans, our identities, either turn to ash or pass away like a mirage, like snow on a dusty desert. They glitter for a moment, then vanish. You know the old poetry, Omar Khayyam, Shakespeare, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, shall dissolve and leave not a rack behind. Decay, impermanence, these aren't enemies, they are allies. They do the letting go for you. Nature itself pries your fingers open, shows you the illusion of control, and invites you to rest and surrender. And when you truly get it, when you feel in your bones that it's all slipping through your hands, that's when something new happens. You find yourself with energy you didn't know you had. But it isn't a power you seized. It came because you released. And that kind of power, born from surrender, not domination, is the kind that can be trusted. Because what we're exploring here isn't merely a set of intellectual ideas. It's a living experience, an unfolding, a moment-to-moment.
Now here is a rather curious thing. You wake up one morning and something has changed. Not outside, mind you, but inside. You see through the games, the rat race, the endless pursuit of more. You understand, perhaps for the first time, that the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. And then comes the peculiar problem. The bills still arrive, the rent is still due, the bank account still dwindles, and you find yourself in this strange position, spiritually awake but financially broke. What a cosmic joke this is. You look around and see people who are fast asleep, utterly unconscious, chasing money like hungry ghosts, and they seem to be doing rather well. Their bank accounts are full, their houses are large, their cars are new. And here you are, having seen through the illusion, and you cannot pay your electric bill. What is going on? Let me tell you something. This is not an accident. This is not some terrible mistake in the cosmic ordering of things. This is precisely how it must be, at least for a time. And if you understand why, you will stop fighting it, and you will begin to see the extraordinary gift hidden in this struggle. You see, money is a very peculiar thing. It is not wealth at all. It is a way of measuring wealth, a symbol, a token, a kind of social agreement. Real wealth is the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food that nourishes your body, the shelter that keeps you warm. Money is simply the bookkeeping. But we have become so enchanted with the bookkeeping that we have forgotten what it was supposed to represent. Think about it. Here is a man with $1 million in the bank. He sits in his office worrying about the stock market, checking his accounts, calculating his net worth. He has forgotten to taste his coffee. He has forgotten to feel the sun on his skin. He has forgotten that he is breathing. Is this man wealthy? Or is he so busy counting his tokens that he has lost touch with the actual treasure? When you awaken spiritually, something very interesting happens. You stop being hypnotized by the symbols. You stop mistaking the menu for the meal. The recipe is not the dinner. The map is not the territory. And suddenly, money loses its grip on you. It stops being the most important thing. It stops being the goal of your life. This is wonderful. This is liberation. But it creates a practical problem because the world around you has not woken up. The landlord still wants his rent in dollars, not in enlightenment. The grocer will not accept spiritual wisdom in exchange for bread. And so you find yourself caught between two worlds. Awake in a sleeping world, trying to live by one set of values while surrounded by another. Now let me tell you why this happens to nearly everyone who begins to wake up. The first reason is very simple. When you awaken, you lose your motivation for the game. You see, most people work not because they love the work, but because they are afraid. Afraid of being poor, afraid of being judged, afraid of being left behind in the great race. Fear is the fuel that drives the economic machine. But when you wake up, the fear begins to dissolve. You realize that you came into this world with nothing, and you will leave with nothing. You understand that the purpose of life is not to arrive at death safely with a well-preserved bank account, but to skid in sideways, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, laughing all the way. The terror of poverty loses its teeth. And without that fear driving you, you naturally slow down. You stop clawing your way to the top. You stop sacrificing your present for some imaginary secure future. This is beautiful. This is health. But in a world organized around fear and competition, it means you will probably make less money, at least for a while. The second reason is that awakening has a way of making your old interests fall away. Think about it. Before you woke up, perhaps you were fascinated by climbing the corporate ladder, by impressing your neighbors, by acquiring status symbols. These things gave you energy. They motivated you. They got you out of bed in the morning. But then you see through them. You understand that status is just a game of make-believe, that the corporate ladder leads nowhere in particular, that your neighbors are not paying as much attention to you as you thought. And suddenly, these pursuits feel hollow. They feel like trying to polish plastic cups when you have discovered the mountain spring. You may still go to work, you may still pay your bills, but the fire has gone out of the old ambitions. You are no longer willing to sell your soul for a paycheck. You are no longer willing to spend hours doing work that feels meaningless just to accumulate more tokens. And naturally, this affects your financial situation. Now, here is the third reason, and this one is quite subtle. When you awaken, you become aware of how the money system actually works. And this awareness can make you somewhat reluctant to participate fully in it. You see that the whole economic game is based on fear, on scarcity, on the illusion that there is not enough to go around. You see how it turns people into competitors, into enemies, how it makes them forget their basic humanity. You understand that the person with the most money is not necessarily the most successful human being. In fact, you begin to suspect that the pursuit of wealth often creates a kind of poverty of spirit, a narrowing of consciousness, a loss of the very things that make life worth living. And so you hesitate. You hold back. You do not throw yourself completely into the game because you have seen the cost of winning. This is not laziness. This is wisdom. But it means you will probably not get rich, at least not in the conventional sense. Let me tell you a story. There was once a fisherman who lived by the sea. Every day he would go out in his small boat, catch enough fish to feed his family, and sell a few at the market. Then he would come home, have lunch with his wife, take a nap in the afternoon, play with his children in the evening, and spend the night making music with his friends. One day a wealthy businessman came to visit. He saw the fisherman resting in the afternoon and said, "Why are you not out fishing? You could catch more fish." "Why would I want to catch more fish?" the fisherman asked. "Well, if you caught more fish, you could sell them and make more money. And then what would I do with the money? You could buy a bigger boat," the businessman explained. "With a bigger boat, you could catch even more fish. Eventually, you could buy several boats, hire other people to fish for you, and become very wealthy." "And then what?" the fisherman asked. "Then you could retire and spend your days resting in the afternoon, playing with your children, and making music with your friends in the evening." The fisherman smiled. "But that is what I am doing now." Do you see? The fisherman had not failed to understand how to make money. He had simply seen through the illusion that making money was the point. He's already living the life that the businessman would spend years trying to earn. He was already wealthy in the only way that matters. When you wake up spiritually, you become more like the fisherman. You realize that the goal everyone is chasing is already available right now. The peace they hope to buy with retirement savings is available in this breath. The security they think money will provide is already here in the simple fact of being alive. The freedom they imagine wealth will bring is already present when you stop being enslaved by the need for more. But here is what happens next. Once you see this, once you really understand it, you face a choice. Do you continue to play the money game with full knowledge that it is just a game? Or do you drop out entirely? And this is where many awakened people get stuck. They think the answer is to reject money altogether, to become penniless wanderers. But this is just another trap. This is the ego in spiritual clothing. True awakening is not about rejecting money any more than it is about chasing it. It is about seeing money for what it actually is, a useful instrument, nothing more, nothing less. When you are truly awake, you can use money without being used by it. You can play the game without being played by the game. The question is not whether you should have money or not have money. The question is whether money has you. Can you hold it lightly? Can you use it when you need it and let it go when you do not? Can you make it without losing your soul and spend it without losing your freedom? This is the art. This is the dance. And it takes time to learn. This is why so many people who wake up go through a period of financial difficulty. They are learning to dance a new dance. They are discovering how to live in the world, but not be of it. They are finding out how to support themselves without selling themselves. And during this learning period, there will be struggles. The old ways of making money do not work anymore, because they required you to be asleep, to be driven by fear, to be motivated by greed. But the new ways have not yet revealed themselves. You are in the gap, the space between the old life and the new. And in this space there is often very little money. But listen carefully. This gap is sacred. This struggle is holy. You are not being punished. You are being transformed. The universe is not withholding abundance from you. It is teaching you a new relationship with abundance. Think of it this way. A snake must shed its old skin in order to grow. During the shedding process, it is vulnerable. Its old protection is falling away, and the new skin is not yet hardened. But if the snake tried to hold on to its old skin out of fear, it would die. It must go through the vulnerable period in order to grow into something larger. This is what is happening to you. Your old relationship with money, your old way of surviving in the world, it is falling away. And yes, it is uncomfortable. Yes, it is frightening. But if you try to cling to the old ways, if you try to go back to sleep just to feel financially secure, you will suffocate. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unsee what you have seen. The only way through is forward. The only way out is through. And on the other side of this difficulty, there is a new way of being in the world, a way that is both spiritually awake and financially functional, a way that allows you to have enough without needing to have everything, a way that allows you to work without making work your identity, a way that allows you to use money as a means without making it the end. But you have to trust the process. You have to have faith that the universe is not going to let you starve. After all, the birds do not have bank accounts, and yet they are fed. The flowers do not worry about their net worth, and yet they are clothed in beauty. If nature takes care of every sparrow, every blade of grass, will it not take care of you? This does not mean you sit back and do nothing. It does not mean you become irresponsible. It means you act from a different place. You act from love rather than fear. You work because the work is there to be done, not because you are trying to prove your worth. You earn money because money is useful, not because money is everything. And here is what I have observed. When people make this change, when they truly let go of the fear and start living from a place of trust, money often begins to flow more easily. Not always, not immediately, but eventually. Because when you are not grasping at money, when you are not strangling every opportunity with desperation, you become more creative. You become more relaxed. You become more attractive to work with, more pleasant to do business with, more open to possibilities. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. When you stop thrashing about trying to force financial success, when you stop panicking about every bill, when you simply allow yourself to be present with what is, something shifts. The water begins to clear. solutions appear, opportunities arise. Not because you are trying to make them happen, but because you have stopped blocking them with your anxiety. But let me be very clear about something. This does not mean you will become wealthy in the conventional sense. You may never have $1 million in the bank. You may never own a large house or a fancy car, and that is perfectly fine, because you will have something far more valuable. You will have your life back. You will have your time. You will have your peace. You will have yourself. The spiritually awake person eventually discovers that there are two kinds of poverty. There is the poverty of not having enough money, which is temporary and can be solved. And there is the poverty of selling your soul for money, which is permanent and can destroy you. Better to be broke for a season than to be rich and dead inside forever. And so here you are, spiritually awake and financially struggling. What do? First, you stop fighting it. You stop seeing your financial difficulty as evidence that something is wrong with you, or that God has abandoned you, or that you have failed. You see it for what it is, a transition period, a time of learning, a sacred passage from one way of being to another. Second, you do what you can do. You find work that does not violate your soul. You pay your bills as best you can. You live simply. You ask for help when you need it. There is no shame in this. The universe takes care of itself through people helping each other. Allow yourself to be helped. Third, you trust. You trust that you are exactly where you need to be. You trust that this difficulty has something to teach you. You trust that the same intelligence that grew your body from a single cell, that beats your heart without your effort, that breathes you while you sleep, this intelligence is not going to abandon you now. You are held. You are supported. You are loved. Not by money, but by the source of all things. And finally, you remember what you have already learned. The meaning of life is not in having, or achieving, or accumulating. The meaning of life is in the living itself, in the breathing, in the seeing, in the tasting. You are already rich beyond measure if you would only stop long enough to notice. You have eyes that can see a sunset. You have ears that can hear music. You have a body that can feel the warmth of the sun. You have a mind that can know wonder. You have a heart that can feel love. These are the real treasures. These are what matter, and they cannot be bought or sold. So yes, you may be broke, but you are awake. And that awakening is worth more than all the money in all the banks, in all the world. Because money can buy you many things, but it cannot buy you consciousness. It cannot buy you freedom. It cannot buy you the peace of knowing who you really are. You are not a person who has or does not have money. You are the awareness in which having and not having appear and disappear like clouds in the sky. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains. You are the sky, and the sky is never poor, never lacking, never in need. This does not pay the rent, I know, but it changes everything about how you relate to the rent. It means you can face financial difficulty without losing yourself. It means you can be broke without being broken. It means you can struggle without despair, because you know that your worth is not measured in dollars, and your life is not defined by your bank balance. The spiritually awake are often financially struggling not because they are being punished, but because they are learning something the sleeping world has forgotten. They are learning that life is not about money. They are learning that the real wealth is consciousness itself. They are learning that you can live richly on very little if you are awake enough to see the abundance that is already here. This learning takes time. This learning costs something. Sometimes what it costs is money. But what you gain in return is invaluable. You gain your soul. You gain your freedom. You gain the ability to live in this world without being consumed by it. You gain the wisdom to use money without being used by it. And eventually, in ways you cannot predict and according to a timeline you cannot control, the financial situation often begins to improve. Not because you go back to sleep and start chasing money again, but because you have learned to be awake and functional at the same time. You have learned to meet the practical demands of life. without forgetting the spiritual truth of life. But even if the money never comes, even if you live your whole life with very little, you will still be wealthier than those who have everything but know nothing. Because you know who you are. You know what matters. You know that you are the universe, looking at itself through these particular eyes, breathing itself through these particular lungs, experiencing itself through this particular life. And that, my friends, is the real gold. Everything else is just paper. So if you are spiritually awake and financially struggling, take heart, you are not doing it wrong. You are going through what must be gone through. Trust the process. Do what you can. And remember always that the one who is struggling is not who you really are. The real you, the awareness that watches all of this, cannot be touched by poverty or wealth. It simply is, and it is enough. The meaning of life is just to be alive. Not to be rich, not to be successful, not to prove anything or achieve anything or accumulate anything. Just to be alive, to breathe, to see, to feel, to know. And this you are already doing. This you have always been doing. This you cannot fail to do. So play the game of money if you must. Pay your bills, feed yourself, take care.
Most of us live as though time were a straight line, stretching from the distant past, through the fleeting present, into the unknown future. We are taught to imagine ourselves as travelers along this line, beginning with birth, moving through childhood, adulthood, and finally ending at death. And because we see it this way, we spend much of our lives trying to get somewhere else. We long to reach the next point on the line, the promotion, the relationship, the success, the retirement, as if the meaning of our existence always lies just ahead. But what if this picture is entirely wrong? What if time is not a line at all, but a trick of perception, a useful convention that we mistake for reality? What if the past and the future are not places we can ever truly visit, but rather ideas, shadows, abstractions that exist only in thought? Consider the past. You may remember it vividly. The warmth of your childhood home, the smell of your grandmother's cooking, the sound of laughter echoing in a familiar room. But where is that now? You cannot hold it, you cannot touch it. It exists only as a memory, a trace in the present mind. And the future, the great destination we are all hurrying toward, is even more elusive. It has never arrived. And when it does, it is no longer the future. It is simply another present moment, just as ordinary, just as immediate as this one. So the only reality you ever truly know is the present. And yet, how rarely do we inhabit it? Instead, we live in stories about the past and fantasies about the future, carrying regrets and anxieties like heavy luggage on a journey that never leaves the station. Time, then, is not so much a thing, but a way of thinking. It is a lens through which we view change, a measurement we impose on the flow of experience. The clock ticks, the calendar flips, and we believe we are moving forward, step by step. But in truth, the movement is not in time. The movement is in ourselves. The present moment is eternal. It never began, and it will never end. What changes is our attention, our awareness, shifting like the beam of a flashlight over the vast field of now. If you look carefully, you will notice that you never experience time itself. You experience only sensations, thoughts, emotions, each one arising and fading within this moment. You do not live in yesterday or tomorrow. You live only here. Yesterday is a thought now. Tomorrow is a thought now. Even the idea of now is a thought happening now. To say time is an illusion is not to say that clocks are useless or that schedules do not function. It is to say that the reality we imagine time to be, a great river carrying us along, is not what we actually experience. What we experience is more like music. A melody does not exist all at once, as notes on a page. It exists in the playing, in the sounding of one note after another. And yet,
The meaning of the melody is never in one note alone, but in the relationship between them. Likewise, life is not a series of isolated moments, but a flowing rhythm. And in that rhythm, the only place you ever stand is the present. But we resist this truth because we are addicted to becoming. We want to be something more than what we are now. We say, one day I'll be happy. One day I'll arrive. And in chasing that arrival, we miss the only arrival there has ever been. For when you look closely, you see that there is no traveler and no line of time. There is only the eternal unfolding of this very moment. Think of it like a wave in the ocean. You might say the wave begins here and ends there. But in reality, the wave is not a thing separate from the ocean, it is the ocean waving. In the same way, what you call your life in time is simply the universe presenting itself. There is no separate you moving through time. There is only the eternal dance of being, taking this shape and then that, rising and falling, just as waves rise and fall in the sea. And if this is so, then death itself is not the end of time, because there was never a personal timeline to begin with. Death is simply another change of form within the eternal now. What you are, in truth, is not bound by the calendar or the clock. You are the present awareness in which all of these things appear. When you see this clearly, an extraordinary freedom opens. For if there is no past holding you and no future binding you, then what is there to fear? What is there to regret? Every burden you carry is only a thought, a story, a memory. And every hope you chase is only a dream, a fantasy, an expectation. None of it has ever been realer than the sensations in your body, the sound of my voice, the beating of your heart right now. And so the invitation is simple. Awaken to this present, not as a stepping stone to somewhere else, but as the very essence of life. For the illusion of time is that it tempts us to live everywhere but here. And the truth of life is that here is all there has ever been. We live in a culture that worships the clock. Our days are chopped into hours, our hours into minutes, our minutes into seconds. We rise when the alarm rings, we eat by the schedule, we work by the calendar, and when the evening comes, we collapse into bed to prepare for another cycle. Life becomes a timetable, a program to be run. And so we mistake the measure for the thing measured. We believe that time is real because we have become servants of the instruments designed to track it. But tell me, have you ever touched a minute? Have you ever seen an hour lying on the street? These are not realities. They are symbols, abstractions, agreements we made with one another to coordinate our lives, and yet we live as though they were masters, as though they held power over our very being. This creates a peculiar anxiety, because if time is real, then it is always running out. Each tick of the clock becomes a step toward loss, loss of youth, loss of opportunity, loss of life itself. We chase after time the way a dog chases its tail, never catching it, never resting. And so we speak of killing time, of wasting time, of saving time, as though time was some great treasure stored in a vault. But time cannot be saved, nor wasted, nor killed. It can only be imagined. You see, the future you are hurrying toward will never come. When it does, it will not be the future, it will be now. And the past you cling to has already dissolved, except as a thought arising here. This present moment is not something moving along a line, like a bead sliding on a string. It is the whole string itself, appearing as a bead for a moment, then another, and another, yet never leaving the fullness of being. The more you chase after what is not here, the more you miss the wonder, that island. It is like standing in the middle of a garden, surrounded by flowers in bloom, and yet staring at your watch, waiting for the right moment to look up. The flowers do not wait, they open now. But perhaps the greatest trick of time is the way it builds the illusion of a separate self. For we imagine ourselves as entities with a beginning in the past and an ending in the future, stretched like a thread across the loom of time. We say, I was born then, and I will die then. But look closely. You never experienced your birth. You will never experience your death. You know only this moment, and in this moment, you are not a fixed identity. You are an ever-changing pattern of sensations, thoughts, and perceptions, none of which remain for more than a fleeting instant. So, who, then, are you? You are not the child you once were, for that child exists only in memory. You are not the elder you imagine becoming, for that image exists only in fantasy. You are not even the you of a moment ago, for that thought has already vanished. You are, in truth, the awareness in which all of these forms appear and disappear. You are the timeless witness of time's illusion. When this realization dawns, a curious thing happens. Life ceases to feel like a journey with a destination and begins to feel like music being played. You no longer listen to the symphony in order to reach the final note, for the value is in the unfolding of the melody. You no longer dance to arrive at some final step, for the joy is in the movement itself. And so you see that existence is not a race to be won, but a song to be sung, a dance to be danced, endlessly, without purpose other than itself. To live without being bound by time is not to abandon all plans or calendars. It is simply to remember that these are conveniences, not truths. You may still make an appointment, but you no longer mistake the appointment for life itself. You may still mark a birthday, but you no longer believe you are merely the number of years measured. For you know that what you truly are is beyond all measurement, beyond all counting. You are the timeless presence in which time appears. And when you live from this recognition, something profound shifts. The anxiety of running out, the fear of missing out, the constant hunger for the next moment, all of this softens. You begin to see that you have never left this moment, and you never will. Eternity is not a long stretch of endless time. Eternity is the absence of time. Eternity is now. So do not wait for the future to give you what you already possess. Do not cling to the past as though it could return. Look instead at what is here. Feel the breath as it enters and leaves. Hear the sounds as they arise and fall. Notice the thoughts as they flicker and vanish. All of it is happening in the only place it could, this eternal present. And once you see this, time becomes play. You can wear a watch, you can follow a schedule, you can meet a deadline, but you do it lightly, knowing it is all part of the dance. For beneath it all, the truth is unchanged. There is no past, there is no future, there is only the miracle of now. And in that miracle, you are free.
Have you ever dreamed of one day standing firm like a rock in the middle of a waterfall, indifferent to criticism, unafraid of being abandoned, unshaken by the invisible cuts that others leave behind, unintentionally or deliberately? You imagine yourself becoming a steel statue, cold, invulnerable, so that finally you can rest. Let go of the burden of always having to be okay, always strong, always maintaining the perfect image that even you have grown tired of building. But pause for a second. Listen to this, not as empty advice, but as a whisper from the very darkness you're trying to avoid. The more you try to escape pain, the tighter it clings to you. The higher you build your walls, the more you become a prisoner in your own fortress. The more you pretend I'm fine, the more pain seeps through every crack, gnawing at you from within until you're exhausted yet still forcing a smile. This isn't a lecture on weakness. This is a call to courage. Pain isn't an enemy to destroy, but a messenger from the depths of your soul. It doesn't come from the venomous words out there, not from betrayal or the voids others leave behind. It only truly stabs you when it touches an old wound, the story you keep replaying in your head, the fear of abandonment, the belief that if I'm good enough, strong enough, lovable enough, no one will hurt me again. You see, the world doesn't have absolute power to break you. That power lies in how you receive what happens. One person can be rejected and still smile as they move forward, because there's no empty space left inside for old pain to echo. Another can collapse from a single cold glance, because that look awakens a chorus of past rejections. So where's the difference? Not in the event, but in the internal point of contact. The same arrow, but some wear armor, others bare their chest. The armor here isn't coldness or numbness, that's just a fake shell, bound to crack sooner or later. Real armor is awareness, knowing exactly where your wound is, why it's bleeding, and instead of covering it, you sit down, look it straight in the eye and whisper, I see you. That's when the miracle happens. Not because the pain disappears, but because it loses its power. It's still there, still aching, but it no longer controls you. You no longer react like a puppet on strings. You observe, you feel, and you choose how to respond. But before stepping into that journey, admit a hard truth. You're still trying to control the world. You believe that if you're smart enough, kind enough, talented enough, life will treat you fairly. You live in constant tension, anticipating every twist, defending against every possibility of hurt. And that very control is the rope binding you tightest. You don't need more defense techniques. You need more light. Light shining into the corners you call the past, mistakes, shame. Light doesn't erase darkness, but it turns darkness from a lair of demons into just a part of your house, old, dusty, but yours. And here's the key. Freedom doesn't lie in the world changing, but in you stopping giving the world power. Everything outside only has strength when it finds an echo inside. When that echo falls silent, not because you cover your ears, but because you've made peace with it, then even if the wind howls, you stand still. If you're nodding, if something in your chest is stirring, then pause for a second and place your hand on your heart. Feel the beat. That's the reminder. You're still alive, still have the chance to go deeper. The next part will take you down one more level, where automatic reactions, sudden anger, wordless sadness, all have origins. They're not random. They're letters from the forgotten part of you. Are you ready to open the envelope? Imagine your life as a ship speeding through the dark night. On deck, you declare yourself captain, holding the wheel, barking orders, adjusting sails, checking the compass. You believe you're leading the journey, but in the pitch-black hole below, there's someone else, nameless, faceless, quietly pulling the throttle, dropping anchor, even stoking the engine fire. Every time the ship suddenly veers, you're surprised, irritated, blaming the waves outside. You have no idea that the real driver has never come on deck. That driver is the unconscious. Not some vague mist, but a complete operating system. Buried memories, suppressed emotions, forbidden desires, fears of abandonment. It never sleeps. It works 24 hours a day, sending signals through sudden anger, unexplained tears, rational decisions you later sabotage. You ask, why does an offhand comment shatter me? Because that comment isn't offhand. It's the key that fits an old lock. The lock named not good enough, unworthy, will be left behind. You hear the click, and the whole door to the past swings open. Images of parents turning away, friends going silent, lovers disappearing. The present words are just the fuse. The bomb was planted long ago. And what do you do with the bomb? You seal the lid. You say, don't think about it, forget it, be strong. You shove it into a dark corner, cover it with dust labeled, I'm fine. But the bomb doesn't vanish. It builds pressure. One day, a light breeze is enough to detonate it, and you call that a bad day. Alan Watts once laughed. You can't control the river by standing on the bank shouting commands. You have to jump in, let the current take you, then learn to swim with it. The unconscious is the river. The more you resist, the harder it pulls. The more you pretend not to see it, the more it surfaces as repeating relationships, self-destructive habits, midnight anxiety. But there's another way. Sit down with the driver in the dark, not to chase him away, not to seize the wheel, just to look him in the face. Ask, who are you? What do you want? What are you afraid of? At first he'll growl. He'll hurl horrific images at you. The time you were laughed at in class, the time you begged someone not to leave, the time you stood alone in a crowd. Don't run. Don't shout. Just stay. As Watts said, the only way to master a nightmare is to step into it and ask what dance it wants to do. When you stay, something strange happens. The driver is no longer the enemy. He's a misunderstood protector. He pulls the throttle because he believes slowing down is dangerous. He drops anchor because he fears you'll drift into deeper waters. He stokes the fire because he's afraid you'll freeze in your own loneliness. Everything he does stems from a distorted loyalty to the child version of you who still believes, if I don't control, I'll die. And this is when you reach out, thank you for keeping me alive. I'm grown now. I can drive. No need to fight. No need to exile. Just dialogue. Every time you do, an invisible rope loosens. The ship stops jerking. You start to feel the true rhythm of the journey, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes rocking, sometimes still. But don't celebrate yet. The driver won't hand over the keys immediately. He needs proof you won't banish him back to the dark. The only proof is consistency. Today, anger flares. You don't suppress it. Don't lash out. Just ask, where are you from? Tomorrow, fear of abandonment rises. You don't rush to text begging. Just whisper, I know you're here. I'm not running. The more you dialogue, the more you realize irrational reactions aren't irrational. They're maps. Every anger points to where your voice was stolen. Every sadness leads to the moment you learned to fake happiness. Every anxiety is a warning from the part of you that still believes, if I'm not perfect, no one will stay. And this map isn't for you to fix yourself. No one needs a new ship. You just need to understand the mechanics of the old one. When you know which throttle overheats the engine, which anchor is too heavy, which sail is torn, you're no longer surprised. You drive with the unconscious instead of being driven by it. Now you stand at the edge of the abyss. Behind is the familiar deck. Shouts of hold the wheel, clanging metal of must control, whistling wind of don't let anyone see you weak. Ahead is open space, no compass, no map, no promise of safety. Only one requirement. Let go of the shell. The shell isn't your skin. It's the persona, the mask you've worn since you learned to say, good child, good student, don't cry. It's the story you tell to be loved. I'm the strong one, need no one, fear nothing. It's the wall you built to hide the nights curled under blankets, the heartbreaks you smile through. Alan Watts laughs. You think you are the mask, then fear losing it. But the mask can't breathe. Only when you take it off do you inhale real air. The death of the shell isn't a dramatic moment. It's thousands of small ones. The time you don't retaliate when insulted. The time you admit I'm scared instead of I'm fine. The time you sit with pain instead of rushing to blame someone. Each time, a piece flakes off. At first you panic. If the mask is gone, who will love me? Then you realize the mask was what made you lonely. When the shell cracks, you enter the refining fire. Not hellfire, but purifying fire, the kind that doesn't burn, just melts away what's fake. In that fire, you see, fear of abandonment isn't truth about you, but a survival lesson from childhood. If I'm not good, Mom will be mad. Explosive anger isn't your personality, but a suppressed scream from all the times you swallowed tears to keep the peace. Need for recognition isn't ambition, but a hole from times your achievements were dismissed, love measured by grades. The fire doesn't judge, it just illuminates. And in that light, you're no longer the wounded one or the one who must be strong. You're just present. But the fire is hot. It demands you sit still. No running for comfort. No hastily gluing the mask back. Just sit. Let the heat seep into every cell. Watts says, don't try to put out the fire. Let it cook you. Raw rice is bland. Cooked rice is fragrant. In this process, you'll meet inner death. Not physical death, but the death of the old self. The old self has names. I must be loved to exist. I must control to be safe. I must be perfect to be worthy. When these mantras dissolve, you'll pass through emptiness, a silence so deep you hear blood rushing in your ears. Don't fill the emptiness with alcohol, work, new love, or empty philosophy. Emptiness is the delivery room. In it, something new is forming. Not a better version of you, no one needs an upgrade. But the original version, the child once taught to hide tears, now allowed to cry. The adult once forced to be strong, now allowed to be weak. The human who lived to be loved, now loves without needing return. And here's the paradox. Only when you accept disintegration do you become invulnerable. Because now there's nothing to lose. No image to protect, no story to defend. You just are, no need to prove it. Watts tells of a Zen master with a robber's knife at his throat. Go ahead and cut. I don't claim this head as my own. The robber trembles and flees, not from fear of death, but because there was no place to strike. The next part will take you out of the fire into the dawn after the long night, where you no longer need armor because you are the armor, where pain still comes but no longer leads you astray, where you live from the center, not the surface. You've walked through the fire. The ashes are still warm under your feet, but the air has changed. No more stinging smoke, just the scent of damp earth after rain. The shell has fallen. The mask has shattered. You stand there, bare, with nothing to cling to, and the strangest thing is you don't feel dead. You just feel alive, for the first time fully, without acting, without holding an image, without proving anything. This isn't a dazzling moment to snap and post online, not a state of I've awakened to brag about. This is the everyday state, as simple as brewing morning tea, hearing birds on the porch, and knowing you don't have to be okay to be allowed to exist. Alan Watts once said, "When you realize there's no one to become, that's when you truly start living." Living from the center means when criticism flies at you, you hear it, feel a slight sting in your chest, but the sting doesn't swell into a storm. You know, this is an old scar being touched. It reminds me I once believed I had to be perfect. I don't believe that anymore. Then you smile, nod, and keep walking. No need to justify. No need to fight back. It means when an ex texts I miss you, you don't rush back to fill a hole. You read, breathe deep, and reply, or don't from a place of inner fullness, not lack. It means when your boss yells at you in front of everyone, you don't shrink, don't snap back. You just look at the boss's anger, look at your fear of being belittled, and choose a response without losing yourself. You still feel pain, don't misunderstand. Dawn doesn't erase night. It just shows you pain is a guest, not the homeowner. The guest arrives, you invite them to sit, pour water, ask, what do you want to say? Then see them off without clinging. Watts tells of a Zen master in a boat on the river. Wind blows, boat tilts. Disciple panics. Master, we're going to capsize. Master smiles. Capsize, then what? The river still flows. You are the river, not the boat, not the passenger, not the wind. You are the entire movement. When you understand this, you no longer need to become someone unhurt. You are unhurt not because you don't feel, but because there's no place left for hurt to take root. And here's the final part, also the hardest, living this every day. In the morning, instead of checking your phone for praise, place your hand on your chest. Ask, what do I need today? When angry, instead of firing off a hostile text, walk for 10 minutes. Let the anger speak its piece. Then decide if it's worth responding. When sad, instead of scrolling for distraction, sit down, cry if you need, write on paper, what is this sadness about? Then burn the paper not to erase but to acknowledge. When afraid, instead of faking confidence, say the truth. I'm afraid of failing. And strangely, telling the truth makes the fear dissolve. Awareness isn't a destination, but a habit. Like brushing teeth, like breathing. You'll still meet old lovers, still face rejection, still lose things. But the difference is, you're no longer the victim of the story, you're the storyteller. One day, you'll realize you no longer need to become invulnerable, because you already are, not because you're stronger, but because you've stopped fighting yourself. Watts ended a lecture with, life is a dance. You don't dance to get somewhere. You dance because the music is playing. Now, the music is playing. Stand up. No mask, no armor, just you. With all your scars, all your laughter, all your silence. If something in you stirs, whisper, I choose to live.
It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a soft drift of shadow at the edge of light. A person who has always seen themselves as kind, honest, and good starts to make small compromises. not out of malice, but out of necessity. A harmless lie here, a silent hesitation there. They tell themselves, this isn't who I am, this is just what must be done. And in that moment, a seed is planted not of evil, but of self-deception. No one wakes up one morning and decides to become cruel. The transformation never happens in a single act. It unfolds through countless moments when the truth of one's heart is exchanged for the comfort of being right. You see, the mind has a strange talent for justifying itself. It will twist, bend, and reshape reality until it can still look in the mirror and say, I am good. The descent begins the moment a person starts believing that goodness is something they can possess, rather than something they must continually rediscover. For when you claim to be good, you also create its opposite, someone else who must be bad. The moment you divide the world into us and them, the game has already begun. The darkness does not enter as hatred, but as certainty. The truth is, we become what we fear whenever we lose sight of our own shadow. Every human being carries within them both the saint and the serpent. But most people spend their lives denying this. They cling to the idea that only others could be cruel, only others could be unjust, only others could fall. And in that denial, the shadow grows stronger, unseen and unacknowledged, until one day it acts on its own. History, time and again, has shown this. Not through monsters who were born that way, but through ordinary people who stopped questioning themselves. A person begins to follow orders they disagree with because it feels easier than conflict. They remain silent while someone else suffers, convincing themselves it is not their place to intervene. Slowly, the conscience adapts. The voice that once shouted now whispers. And in the quiet, they begin to call obedience virtue. It is not that these people become evil. It is that they lose the capacity to see. Awareness collapses under the weight of justification. Once you convince yourself that your actions are for the greater good, almost anything can be done without guilt. Cruelty, when wrapped in purpose, can masquerade as righteousness. The human mind loves order. It wants to believe that if it follows rules, obeys systems, and respects authority, it will remain safe. But safety has always been a mirage. When a person stops thinking for themselves, when they surrender their inner compass to someone else's map, they are no longer alive in the full sense. They have become a fragment of someone else's idea. And yet, you can't blame them entirely. Most people are not cruel because they enjoy it. They are cruel because they believe they must be. Under enough pressure, fear, or belonging, the line between right and wrong begins to blur. When your survival, status, or comfort depends on silence, silence begins to sound like morality. The mind says, I had no choice. But there is always a choice, it's just that some are more painful than others. The moment you avoid pain at all costs, you also avoid truth. Because truth is rarely comfortable, and goodness is rarely easy. Look closely, and you will see that corruption begins not in grand betrayals, but in tiny moments of self-abandonment. You tell yourself, I'll speak up next time. I'll do what's right when the stakes are higher. But the soul doesn't erode in one collapse, it erodes in quiet increments. A man becomes dishonest the day he starts believing that honesty must wait for a better time. There is another force at work, subtler, but far more dangerous, the need to belong. Human beings will do almost anything to avoid feeling isolated, and so they conform. They agree to things they do not believe in. They laugh at cruelty to avoid being outcast. They obey the unspoken rules of the tribe, even when those rules betray their heart. Because belonging feels safer than conscience. But the cost of belonging, when bought at the expense of awareness, is the slow disintegration of the self. This is why some of the darkest acts in history were not done by villains, but by people who simply wanted to fit in. They called it loyalty, duty, or patriotism, words that sound noble, but can hide deep fear. They forgot that morality is not obedience to authority. It is obedience to truth. When the crowd moves in one direction, the temptation to follow is overwhelming. The human mind, desperate not to stand alone, convinces itself that the majority must be right. It takes great courage to question what everyone else accepts, to refuse the comfort of belonging for the discomfort of awareness. But awareness is the only soil in which integrity can grow. You see, we often think of evil as a deliberate act, a conscious choice to harm. But most evil arises from unconsciousness. It grows wherever people stop noticing what they're doing or why. It creeps in through habit, through convenience, through the dulling of sensitivity. That is how the good lose their way, not through malice, but through mechanical living. The tragedy is not that people fall, but that they fall while believing they are standing upright. The most dangerous illusion is righteousness, because it blinds you to your own shadow. When you believe you are unquestionably good, you stop examining your motives. You stop listening to others. You start defending your identity instead of discovering truth. And so, slowly, the person who once helped others begins to justify harm. They say, it's for their own good. The one who once valued honesty learns to deceive themselves. The one who once stood for compassion begins to believe that cruelty is necessary. And all the while, they continue to see themselves as good. This is the quiet tragedy of human nature, that the very desire to be good can lead to blindness. Because when you cling too tightly to one side of yourself, you create the very darkness you hope to escape. You separate the world into pure and impure, righteous and wicked, and in doing so, you build a prison for your own awareness. Every human being is capable of this. You and I are no exception. The potential for cruelty, deceit, and self-deception exists in all of us. But so does the potential for awareness, compassion, and truth. The difference lies not in what we are, but in how awake we are to ourselves. So perhaps the real question isn't, how do good people become bad? But rather, when do they stop being aware of who they are? Because when awareness fades, anything becomes possible, and not always for the better. If you look deeply enough, you will see that the struggle between good and evil is not a battle between people, but a conflict within consciousness itself. Every person is born with both the impulse to create and the impulse to destroy. The difference between the two is not in the heart, but in the level of awareness guiding it. When awareness sleeps, goodness becomes mechanical. It turns into habit, into performance, into self-image. And when goodness becomes unconscious, it easily transforms into its opposite. What we call evil is often simply goodness without light, action without reflection. It is the mind acting without seeing. And this blindness, this absence of awareness, is far more dangerous than malice. Because the one who knows he is cruel may still awaken, but the one who believes he is righteous will never question his own hand. So how does one remain awake in a world that constantly tempts us to sleep? How does one live without becoming what one fears? It begins with remembering that no one is entirely one thing. You cannot divide yourself into pure and impure, as though light and shadow were separate entities. They are two faces of the same being. To deny the shadow is to give it power. To look at it clearly, to admit, I too am capable of harm, is to take its power away. This is the first safeguard, awareness of your own potential for darkness. When you know that you can be cruel, you also know when cruelty begins to rise within you. You can see it before it acts, before it speaks, before it finds justification. You cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. Most people, however, do not want to see this part of themselves. They spend their lives polishing the mask of goodness while the shadow grows behind it. They mistake reputation for integrity, image for substance. But integrity has nothing to do with how you appear to others. It is how honestly you see yourself. The second safeguard is the courage to question your justifications. The mind will always find a reason to excuse its behavior. They deserved it, I had no choice. It's for the greater good. These are the whispers of self-deception. Each time you hear them, pause. Ask, am I protecting truth or protecting my image of myself? Because truth does not need protection. Only ego does. If you notice carefully, you will find that self-deception thrives in haste. When you rush, when you act under pressure, when you obey without reflection, you create the perfect conditions for blindness. That is why all awareness begins in stillness. When you stop reacting long enough to see clearly, life reveals its patterns. You begin to notice the subtle moment when kindness turns to pity, when conviction turns to arrogance, when belonging turns to obedience. You begin to sense how easily the good heart can harden when it feels threatened. Awareness does not prevent darkness from appearing, but it prevents you from confusing it with light. There is also another force, perhaps the most powerful of all, that protects the heart from corruption: empathy. Not the sentimental kind that we offer only to those we like, but the deeper empathy that recognizes itself in others. When you can feel another person's fear, confusion, or pain, you remember that they are not so different from you. It becomes difficult to harm what you can see yourself in. This is why systems that seek to control people always begin by reducing empathy. They divide, label, and dehumanize. They make the other seem distant or inferior, so that conscience no longer interferes with action. But awareness reverses this process. It brings the other close again. It reminds you that behind every face is the same trembling mystery that looks through your own eyes. When empathy returns, morality is no longer a set of rules. It becomes a natural response of the heart. You do not need commandments to stop you from cruelty when you can feel its echo within yourself. The third safeguard is moral courage. Awareness without courage can become passive. It can see clearly, but still choose comfort over truth. True awareness demands the willingness to act when silence would be easier. It asks you to lose what is safe in order to remain whole. This is not about grand heroism. It is about the quiet, ordinary moments when integrity costs you something. When you speak up though your voice shakes. When you refuse to join in cruelty, even when everyone else is laughing. When you admit your fault instead of defending your pride. Each time you do this, you reclaim a small part of your freedom. The strength to do this does not come from discipline or ideology. It comes from humility. You begin to see that you are not separate from those you judge. The same forces that corrupt others live in you as potential. The only difference is whether you are awake to them. This humility gives rise to compassion, not the weak kind that tolerates everything, but the wise kind that understands. When you understand why people fall, you no longer stand above them, you stand beside them. And from that position, you can help. You see, it is not the darkness that destroys the world. It is unconsciousness. The good person who stops noticing, the just person who stops reflecting, the kind person who stops questioning. Evil does not need hatred to thrive. It only needs forgetfulness. But when you remember, when you see something remarkable happens, you begin to sense the fragile beauty of human nature. How easy it is to lose balance, and how miraculous it is that we ever find it. You start to forgive, not to excuse, but because you recognize yourself in every fall and every redemption. If you can hold this awareness, you will see that the line between good and evil is not a wall dividing people. It is a thread running through every heart. The task of life is not to stand on one side of it, but to walk it, awake. And when you walk that line consciously, you discover a secret. The light that keeps you from falling is not perfection. It is honesty. The willingness to look within and say, yes, I am capable of anything, but I choose awareness. So in the end, perhaps good and evil are not opposites at all. They are the two movements of a single dance, the contraction and expansion of consciousness itself. When you cling to one and reject the other, you lose your rhythm. When you see both as part of the same whole, you begin to move freely again. The one who understands this no longer fears his shadow. He can walk through the world without armor, because he has nothing left to defend. He knows that monsters are not born, they are forgotten selves. And when you remember who you truly are, when you see that even your darkness belongs to the light, the monster dissolves. Not because you conquered it, but because you finally turned to face it. It's strange, isn't it? How the world convinces you that freedom has a price tag. That somewhere on the other side of financial success, there waits a version of you who finally breathes without fear. You picture it often, that effortless life, with no more bills to worry about, no debts to calculate, no need to chase anyone or anything. Yet when you finally taste a glimpse of that comfort, something unexpected happens. Instead of peace, you feel a quiet emptiness. You look at your bank account and realize that the numbers may have changed, but the restlessness within you hasn't. What most people call financial freedom is often just a more comfortable form of slavery. You become free from the old anxieties, only to replace them with new ones. Now the question isn't how do I survive, but how do I stay ahead? How do I protect what I've built? How do I make sure it doesn't all vanish? And so, even in abundance, you worry. Even in wealth, you tremble. Money, after all, is an abstraction, a symbol of value that we mistake for value itself. The illusion begins when you start believing that money is a source of freedom rather than a tool. In truth, it is simply a measure of human trust, a shared agreement, a token for the exchange of energy, skill, and time. But because we live in a world that worships measurement, we mistake the symbol for the substance. We try to buy freedom the same way we buy comfort, not realizing that true freedom can't be purchased. It can only be perceived. If you pay close attention to people who have made their fortune, you'll often notice the peculiar anxiety that follows them. It's not the same fear of scarcity they had before, but a subtler one, a fear of losing identity. For so long, they were defined by their pursuit. Their dreams were driven by struggle, by the next milestone. When the pursuit ends, they often don't know who they are without it, and so they keep running. They keep accumulating. They turn life into a game of endless increase, unaware that they've become prisoners to their own success. The human mind has an astonishing ability to normalize everything it touches. That's why people who once dreamed of earning a few $100s a week now can't sleep unless they're chasing thousands. We move the goalposts every time we reach them, not because we're greedy, but because the ego can't survive without pursuit. The ego lives in the distance between where you are and where you think you should be. So when money removes that distance, the ego quietly creates a new one. That's why you might have noticed, even after you reach a certain level of comfort, a quiet voice still says, "It's not enough." It's the same voice that once said, "When I get there, I'll finally be happy." But happiness doesn't wait at the end of the road. It exists only in the act of walking. The tragedy of modern ambition is that it teaches people to run faster toward a finish line that doesn't exist. Money itself isn't evil. It's neutral, like water or fire. It can nurture or destroy, depending on how it's held. But the human tendency to attach identity to money, that's where the suffering begins. Because once you believe your worth depends on your wealth, every fluctuation in your fortune feels like a fluctuation in your soul. When your net worth rises, you feel strong. When it falls, you feel small. And in that fragile dance between pride and panic, you lose sight of the truth. You were never meant to be measured in digits. Money is a form of play, a beautifully sophisticated game that humanity created for itself. The problem is that we've forgotten it's a game. We treat it as survival. We measure human success by the numbers printed on a screen, and we wonder why everyone feels so anxious. Because when play becomes pressure, joy turns into tension. You can see it everywhere. The man in a suit staring at his phone in a restaurant, unable to taste his meal. The woman scrolling through investment charts late at night, her eyes dim from the glow of her own ambition. The young person glued to videos about financial freedom, yet living in constant comparison with people who seem freer than them. We've turned freedom into another commodity to be marketed, sold, and envied. We think, if I can just make more, then I'll be free. But freedom that depends on a future condition isn't freedom. It's postponement. It's a subtle way of saying, I can't live now because I haven't earned it yet. And this is where the illusion deepens. Because when you finally get there, when the bills are paid and the debts are gone, you suddenly realize that you still don't know how to rest. You've trained your mind to chase, not to be still. And so, when there's nothing left to chase, you feel uneasy. You start new projects, new goals, new investments, anything to keep the machine running. You can buy time, but you can't buy presence. You can buy comfort, but not contentment. And yet, most people spend their entire lives trying to buy the things that can only be found in stillness. Wealth without awareness is a trap. When you forget to enjoy life, money simply becomes a more elaborate way to distract yourself from it. You can't really get something for nothing, because you can't really get anything at all. Life isn't about getting, it's about being. We misunderstand abundance. We think it means more possessions, more digits, more influence. But in truth, abundance is the ability to experience the present moment without resistance. It's the peace that arises when you no longer need anything to feel complete. Imagine you were born in a world where money didn't exist, only trade, cooperation, and trust. Would you still feel poor? Or would you see that the true currency of life is time, attention, and love? Those three are the only forms of wealth that never lose value, never suffer inflation, and never decay when shared. Yet those are the very things we trade away for symbols. You might say, but money gives me freedom. And yes, it can give you choices, but choices are not freedom. Freedom is the ability to choose without fear. It is a state of mind, not a state of account. You can have billions and still feel trapped in comparison, or have very little and feel vast inside. The most powerful people in the world are not those who can buy anything they want, but those who need nothing to feel whole. That is why the mystics, monks, and philosophers across history have always seemed strangely serene, not because they rejected money, but because they saw through it. They understood that the desire for control is the root of all bondage, and money is one of the cleverest illusions of control that humanity ever invented. So much of modern life is built around the fear of loss. We insure everything, save everything, protect everything, as if immortality could be purchased in monthly payments. But what if true freedom lies not in what you secure, but in what you can release? We suffer from a peculiar form of madness. We spend our lives earning money to live, and then forget to live while earning it. Think of how many moments are lost to worry. How much joy is postponed because it didn't seem practical at the time. We tell ourselves that one day, when everything is in order, we'll finally relax. But that day never arrives, because life was never designed to be in order. It was designed to be experienced. To the person who has chased success all their life, the greatest challenge isn't earning more, it's learning how to stop. To sit quietly in the abundance they already have and realize that peace doesn't come from possession, but perception. The pursuit of wealth can be beautiful when it's creative, when it's done as an art, a dance with life, not a struggle against it. But when it becomes obsession, it distorts your entire relationship with existence. Because in your attempt to own the world, you forget that you're already part of it. You forget that every sunset, every breath, every heartbeat is wealth beyond measure. The truth is not to condemn money, but to reveal its limits. Do not seek yourself in what you earn, because if your identity depends on your success, then even when you win, you lose. You become like a man clutching water. The tighter you hold, the less you have. And so the paradox remains. The more you chase freedom through money, the more you bind yourself to it. The moment you believe you need it to be happy, you've already surrendered your freedom to it. But if you can see through the illusion, if you can learn to play with money instead of worshiping it, something miraculous happens. You begin to experience wealth as flow rather than possession. You begin to move through life with lightness rather than tension. You begin to realize that freedom isn't something to achieve, but something you've always had. And that realization, once seen, can never be unseen. There comes a point in every person's life when they must ask a frighteningly honest question. What am I really chasing? For years, you've called it security, success, stability. But beneath those words, there is something deeper, a longing not for money, but for meaning, for a feeling of safety that no number seems to provide, for a sense of being enough. And yet, the tragedy is that you already are. You cannot get to happiness. You can only be it. That is what so many forget. They keep trying to arrive at a place that was never elsewhere. Freedom is not a destination. It is a quality of awareness, a way of seeing life without being dominated by the need to control it. Money, in itself, is simply condensed energy. It amplifies who you already are. If you are anxious, it gives you more things to be anxious about. If you are free, it gives you more ways to express that freedom. That is why some people become miserable when they become wealthy. The noise inside them was never addressed, only magnified. But once you understand this, something begins to shift. You start to see that your relationship with money mirrors your relationship with life itself. The same way you grasp for control in your finances, you grasp for certainty in your future. The same way you hoard wealth out of fear, you hoard emotions out of insecurity. And when you let go of one, you begin to soften toward the other. The art of freedom is not about how much you have, but how lightly you can hold it. When you stop trying to possess everything, you realize you already belong to everything. That is the essence of effortless action. The understanding that wealth, like water, flows best when it is not forced. Think of a river. You can swim with it, or you can exhaust yourself fighting against it. The current does not care whether you resist. It keeps moving. And so, the wise person learns to float. They allow wealth to come and go like the tide, understanding that both movement and stillness are part of the same ocean. In our culture, we celebrate accumulation. We admire those who climb, collect, and conquer. But rarely do we honor those who release. Yet, release is where true power hides, because only the one who can let go fully is the one who is no longer afraid. There is a profound freedom in being able to say, if it comes, good. If it goes, good. Imagine if you could live like that, not careless, but deeply trusting. To live so completely in the present that you stop postponing peace for a tomorrow that never arrives. You see, money can only bring freedom to those who are already free inside. To everyone else, it becomes another chain, a golden one, perhaps, but still a chain. Because the moment you say, I will relax when I have enough, you have made your peace conditional on something external, something the world can always take away. The only real wealth is inner stillness. When you can sit in silence with nothing to prove, nothing to protect, and still feel whole, that is when you have arrived. And strangely enough, it is from that very stillness that abundance flows. Because when you stop chasing, you create space for things to find you. There is a principle of reversal in life. The harder you try to hold on, the faster things slip through your fingers. But when you relax your grip, when you allow, you begin to notice that life naturally supports you. Opportunities arise, people appear, synchronicities unfold, not because you forced them, but because you stopped resisting them. Think of a tree. It does not strain to grow, yet it grows. It does not demand fruit, yet fruit appears. It simply exists in alignment with what it is, and in that alignment, abundance becomes inevitable. The same law applies to you. If you were to measure your wealth not in dollars, but in awareness, how rich would you be? How present are you to your own life? How deeply do you experience each moment before it slips away? Most people trade this awareness for the illusion of progress. They live in a constant state of not yet, always preparing to live, but never arriving. And yet, life keeps happening, not later, but now. That is the ultimate irony. We try to buy more time, forgetting that time is the only currency we can never increase. Every moment spent chasing becomes a moment unseen, unlived, unappreciated. But when you realize that this very moment, this breath, this heartbeat, is the only enough that ever existed, something inside you softens. You no longer fight the flow. You start to dance with it. The meaning of money is in its movement. It is not meant to be hoarded, but circulated. It is energy in motion. And when you let it move, it brings life. When you freeze it, it begins to die. The same is true for joy, for love, for creativity. These things only remain alive when shared. That is why generosity has always been the mark of a truly wealthy spirit. Because generosity is not about giving away money. It is about releasing attachment. It is saying, I trust life enough to let this go. And the universe, being an echo of that same trust, often responds in kind. Real wealth does not come from possessing more, but from needing less. You become infinitely rich the moment you stop trying to compensate for your sense of lack. You realize that all this time, you were never chasing money, you were chasing yourself. You were searching for the feeling of being enough. And the moment you recognize that you already are, the chase ends. This does not mean you abandon ambition or stop working. It simply means you stop confusing effort with worth. You work not to become something, but to express what you already are. That shift, subtle as it seems, transforms everything. Suddenly, your actions feel lighter. You stop competing and start creating. You stop worrying about outcomes because you understand that what truly matters was never at stake. The real purpose of money is play, to facilitate exchange, creativity, and connection, not to define identity. When you begin to treat it as play, you participate in the great rhythm of life without losing yourself in it. You can work hard, earn much, even enjoy luxury, but you no longer confuse the mask for the face. Look around the world and you will notice that the happiest people are not necessarily those who have the most, but those who are most alive. They use money like musicians use notes, as a means of expression, not measurement. They can laugh at losses, smile through uncertainty, and still trust the unfolding of things. You may not control every rise and fall of fortune, but you can always control your relationship to it. You can choose to see money as movement rather than meaning. You can choose to treat wealth as a guest rather than a god. The moment you stop believing that happiness lies somewhere beyond the next financial milestone, you begin to wake up. You realize that the true treasure of life is not stored in banks, but in awareness, in the ability to see beauty in what is already here. Imagine living from that space. You still earn, still plan, still invest, but you no longer suffer through it. You no longer chase freedom, you express it. Because the free person is not one who has escaped the system, but one who no longer believes it defines them. Wealth and freedom are not opposites. They only appear that way when you forget who you are. When you remember, everything becomes simple. You earn when you need to, you rest when you can, and you allow life to unfold in its rhythm. And then, quite mysteriously, abundance finds its way back to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped blocking it. You stopped clutching at life and started trusting it. The fool chases freedom through control. The wise simply realize that control was never needed. And in that realization, you discover the most profound truth of all.